My friends, Israel will soon start ground operations against Hamas militants in the urban area of Gaza. And we can only fear the worst for the Palestinian civilians living there. The Battle of Gaza will be bloody. Actually, there have been 7 battles of Gaza between Israelis and Palestinians since 2005. So the upcoming Israeli offensive will be their 8th attempt to put down Palestinian armed resistance. I think there are some key points to analyze regarding Israel's Operation Iron Swords. The most important one is that from a military perspective, it will be much harder than you might think, and tactical challenges await the Israeli Defense Force in Gaza. If Hamas prepared for the defense of Gaza the same way it did for the attack on Israel, then the Israeli military may face serious problems. Wow! Alright boys, let's skip foreplay and go straight to the point. Currently, one of the most important factors that could complicate the IDF's mission in Gaza is the situation on its northern flank against HZB forces in Lebanon. Over the years, HSB has developed a well-trained and well-equipped military force of at least 30,000 heavily armed and ideologically driven fighters with years of combat experience. We can only assume the Lebanese to be only waiting for the Israeli army to get bogged down in the urban warfare of Gaza to launch their own ground operations somewhere in the north, perhaps in the area of the Sheba farms, Avivim, or Metula. In this case, it will be hard for Israel to manage a war on 2 fronts. For now, we're only talking about skirmishes, but these could quickly escalate. And in my opinion, we could see the beginning of some shaping operations by the Lebanese. For example, on October 15th, an Israeli base at the Lebanese border came under fire from ATGMs, MRLS systems mounted on pickup trucks and mortar shells. And then shortly after, HZB forces also managed to target the crew of a Merkava tank, which ended up causing at least 2 fatalities. Meanwhile, the next day on October 16th, they actually managed to damage yet another patrolling Merkava. There are also reports that the Lebanese are targeting sensors and cameras located all over the border between the 2 countries. That could definitely be one of the reasons that could explain the current standstill of the Israeli army and their reluctance to storm Gaza right away. With that being said, I think the Israel Defense Force's biggest weakness lies in its inability to take losses. How many casualties is the IDF willing to take to achieve its objectives? This phenomenon started in the 1980s when the existence of the State of Israel was not in jeopardy anymore. During every military campaign, ground operations were eventually stopped after Israeli troops reached a certain threshold of casualties. And this also explains why they often resort to airstrikes. The first example is during Operation Peace in Galilee in 1982 in South Lebanon. After initial success, Israel faced stubborn resistance in Beirut against the Palestine Liberation Organization and its allies. Although Israelis besieged the PLO, they feared the casualties of a head-on assault and street-to-street fighting. Eventually, the IDF started pulling back its military forces after it suffered 654 KIA in roughly 4 months. When Israel went for round 2 and invaded South Lebanon again in 2006, it took 121 military fatalities and over 1,200 wounded within a month for the Israel Defense Force to give up on its operation against HZB. And we know Israel didn't succeed in its mission because on Wikipedia, the outcome says inconclusive. The last example is the 2014 Gaza War. Typically, when Israeli forces entered Gaza, they would not lose more than 10 soldiers KIA. And that was already considered to be a lot. But in 2014, within a couple days, they suffered 67 military fatalities and another 469 wounded. That's a battalion gone! And Israel withdrew its forces claiming it had reached its objectives. and that they made sure HMS would not be a threat anymore.
Fuck.
In 2014, the Palestinian HMS faction deployed between 2,500 and 3,500 fighters to defend Gaza. Now the situation is completely different. The scope and scale of the recent atrocities have pushed the Israeli population to demand an offensive that would end the militant group once and for all. According to Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant, in other words, with Operation Iron Swords, Israel is not only preparing a counterattack, but a punitive expedition. On top of that, due to the heavy losses they just suffered, Israeli soldiers are angry and they want revenge. I saw a video of IDF soldiers showing no mercy to 4 Palestinian insurgents that had openly surrendered. We can only expect the worst once these soldiers enter Gaza, and the Palestinians know this. Take a look at what the Washington Post wrote. Israelis getting bogged down in the messy unpredictability of urban warfare. This time the IDF will not only face 2,000 to 3,000 enemy fighters, but they can expect the Al-Qassam brigades to deploy all of its 40,000 combatants. And the battle will be brutal because the Palestinians have their backs against the wall. HMS is going to fight to the end to defend their only stronghold in the world. Even worse, with no other alternative than the impending total destruction of Gaza. The entire Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip will form ranks behind HMS. On Twitter, there was this post showing Palestinian teenagers getting military training. So once again, we can expect every male over 16 to join the fight. That means 600,000 possible combatants. Realistically, not all of them will fight. There's not enough weapons for everyone.
When the one with a rifle gets killed, the one who is following picks up the rifle and shoots.
But the Israeli military could face, 150,000 men at arms, who will not only be fighting to protect HMS, but they will fight to protect their homes and families. The ground forces of the IDF represent roughly 126,000 active duty personnel. Yet, this doesn't seem to be enough because they keep delaying the offensive. And spoilers, it seems Israeli projects casualties to be significant, since it has already called for backup. Here from Reuters, Israel drafts 300,000 reservists as it goes on the offensive. Overall, we're talking about 500,000 Israeli troops. That's enormous for a population of 7 million people. And these units have been flocking to the south of the country where more and more armored vehicles are taking positions around Gaza. Yet are these reservists combat ready? Or do they need time to be retrained? Is it why ground operations keep getting delayed? Another reason seems to be that the IDF doesn't have enough military gear like bulletproof vests, helmets, and knee pads for all its reservists. A theory confirmed by the Times of Israel. Reserve soldiers complain that equipment is lacking or substandard, which is understandable since this is the largest call-up in the country's history. Oh yeah, and some people online believe that Israeli Special Operations Unit will simply go in, fight the bad guys, and get back all the hostages. Achi, this is not Hollywood. This article from the Times of Israel revealed the following about the first day of the attack on October 7th. According to some accounts, the Israeli Air Force helicoptered into Be'eri 2 platoons of its Special Forces Shaldag unit. But apparently they were overwhelmed by the insurgents. Folks said about 90 insurgents entered Be'eri at about 7 a.m. on Saturday. 2 hours later, the Shaldag detachment of about 20 troops landed, but within a short time, the force was eroded. That's a military euphemism to say that they all got KIA or wounded. Now imagine fighting HMS on their home turf against fighters that have spent their entire life in Gaza. The battle could be like a Middle Eastern Iwo Jima, heavily fortified positions with bunkers, tunnels, and booby traps everywhere. plus the smell of cigarettes, garlic, and pollution. For real, we've talked about it in the previous videos, but Palestinians have spent years digging tunnels to move between buildings undetected and to create numerous fighting positions that are reinforced with concrete and steel. The most lethal ones are located in basements since they can't be destroyed with airstrikes and artillery, and instead have to be destroyed through direct shots or outright stormed by riflemen. It's nothing new. The same tactics were used by IS insurgents in Iraq. According to this very interesting article, the fighting was made worse by extensive tunnels that are allowing IS fighters to appear seemingly out of nowhere, attack, then retreat to the hidden bunkers. So who's volunteering to go into these tunnels? Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Israel-Palestine war. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. At the same time, the IDF is a heavily armored army, right? What could possibly go wrong? Here, let's play a game. You have 5 seconds to spot the enemy fighters. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We all saw the images in the mainstream media. The IDF has accumulated a significant number of armored vehicles around Gaza. In this video, at least 50 armored vehicles of all types, Merkava 4M, IFVs, APCs, all parked right outside the Gaza Strip. However, as history has shown us, urban warfare negates a lot of the attackers' technological and firepower superiority. We have to remember that Gaza is one of the most dense urban areas in the Middle East. Israeli mechanized brigades can expect to face a lot of anti-tank weapons. In this video, Israeli vehicles haven't even made it to the urban area of Gaza, that they are already getting targeted. In one of the last videos posted by HMS, we see them make homemade PG-29V Vampire rockets for their massive RPG-29s. And they're making them by the dozens. And in the next frame, we see that every fighter of these anti-tank units is provided with 3 of those rockets. And they even showed us how they plan on using them. In this cinematic trailer, we see them practice an ambush on a real-life size mock-up Israeli armored column, using those same RPG-29s. Like you can see on screen, these can be shoulder-fired. These can destroy or damage enemy armored vehicles at an effective range of 500 meters. It's not a lot, but in urban warfare, it's more than enough. One scenario we could imagine is that the Palestinians at first give little resistance to draw IDF columns right into Gaza with a false feeling of confidence, and then they would swarm and fire at them from all sides. To avoid such scenarios, this means Israeli infantry will have to dismount from the IFVs and clear each sector one by one. This is when all the Palestinian mortar teams could intervene. Within a couple seconds, they could fire a couple rounds at the exposed infantry and then pack up and quickly switch positions. Even worse, what about these underground mortar positions? Even with a lot of surveillance UAVs, it will be very hard for the Israelis to detect all these firing positions. Overall, from a tactical perspective, this means lots of house-to-house fighting. We can expect the Palestinians to move quickly into position to ambush advancing columns, and then pivot to concealed locations. So when the troops on the ground will call for close air support, there's a very good chance that Israeli Air Force or artillery will just fire at empty positions. Another problem we can imagine is that whenever Israeli assault squads will manage to secure a block, they will need to leave a lot of riflemen behind to hold the ground. During the 2016-2017 Battle of Mosul, Iraqi commanders complained that it's hard to consider an area liberated because though we control the surface, the enemy will appear from under the ground. Oh my god. Telling your mom that her cooking is bad has more chances of success than this military operation. In the end, we can expect Israel to lose over 2,000 soldiers KIA and an extra 14,000 wounded in this operation to clear out HMS from Gaza. Are they willing to pay that price? Because now they have momentum And I feel the Israeli population would be ready to accept such casualties, but only now. Oh yeah, I forgot. Israelis will also face a lot of IEDs and minefields. If the first vehicle of the column gets hit by an IED, all the others behind will have to stop as well. And without movement, the entire column will become very vulnerable. The response to this, Israel needs a lot of sappers and engineering units. Once again, that was a big problem for the Iraqi army in Mosul. The progression of their armored columns was extremely slow. We're talking about eliminating 10 enemy fighters and securing 1 square kilometer per day. The Palestinians could very well combine RPGs and IEDs. For example, check out this article from Forbes about the 2014 push of the Golani Brigade into Gaza. On the second day, a Palestinian rocket team emerged from a tunnel and blew up a broken down Israeli M113 armored personnel carrier. 7 Israeli soldiers, KIA. We can also assume there were a lot of wounded Israeli troops. If we say 3 wounded for 1 KIA in this situation, we have an entire platoon that got eroded. After this ambush, the Israelis sent in engineers to clear the area, retrieve the damaged vehicles, and pull out the wounded. To achieve this, they have those Puma combat engineering vehicles you can see on screen. But like we've seen in Ukraine, usually armies don't have enough of those. To which Forbes added, Israeli casualties mounted as a close quarters battle raged around the engineers' convoy. And we are not done. The IDF could also face loitering munitions, aka kamikaze drones. From the latest videos of HMS, those seem to be launched from inside buildings. So these could target advancing armored columns inside the city within seconds. I'm not an expert in this topic, but you would need electronic warfare units advancing with the main force, because Palestinians could come up with very sophisticated ambushes. These Israeli vehicles I showed you were geolocated only 7 kilometers away from the border with Gaza, and they're all packed up in parade formation. Now, to be fair, Israelis did start to add cope cages on top of their tanks. A very rudimentary technology learned from the Eastern Front, which has shown some efficiency against drones. In this frame alone, you can see 5 tanks equipped with these cope cages. But if we increase the difficulty level, there's something else that could happen. Palestinians could repurpose their rockets, and instead of firing them at random just on Israeli territory, they could use them to strike these vulnerable armored formations. And this is a serious threat, because in this video you can see a rocket attack in the vicinity of this unit, with Israeli tank crews taking cover behind the armored vehicles. Conclusion, the IDF will have no other choice but to bomb and bulldoze its way into Gaza. But the Israelis will also have to turn the city upside down because of all the tunnels and underground hideouts. This could explain the current hesitation of Tzahal. Israel can 100% win this battle, but are they ready to pay the price? That's why currently there is a heavy emphasis on airstrikes and heavy artillery rather than ground engagements. Thus, going back to what I told you in the introduction, the Israeli army is a casualty-phobic army. For this mission, the Israeli Air Force prepared dozens and dozens of American JDAM glide bombs for its fleet of F-16s. In this one, allegedly a tunnel system seems to have been targeted. And in this one, we see a position Palestinians used to fire rockets from that gets bombarded by the Israelis. But once the real fighting starts, we can expect them to do a lot of spray and pray. Like you've seen on social media, the latest airstrikes have turned entire city blocks of Gaza into rubble. In turn, it's going to be very difficult for Israeli armored formations to push through when you have parts of the city looking like that. And then there's diminishing returns of artillery bombardments against places that are already destroyed. Just like the German paratroopers did during the Battle of Monte Cassino, where they managed to turn every ruin into a fortress. Sadly, these bombings also brought its load of civilian casualties, like this convoy that was evacuating as told by the Israelis from North Gaza and that still got targeted. Really horrible. The battle will be especially messy because of all the civilians that are essentially besieged and that have nowhere else to go. Gaza has 2.3 million inhabitants, of which 45% are under 18. Take a look at what the Washington Post wrote. Israel orders 1 million Gazans to evacuate. UN says that's impossible. This is why Israel is trying to displace the civilian population from the north of the Gaza Strip to the southern parts. Ideally, they want those to evacuate to Egypt. But Arab countries know that if that happens, there's a big chance that the Palestinians won't be allowed back inside. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.